Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about Floral Street fragrances. So Floral Street are a brand with 11 fragrances and I have all 11. So I'm going to talk about each one in turn and tell you what I like, what I dislike, and I'm also going to tell you my favourites at the end of the video. So if you haven't already, then please do consider subscribing, and also please like this video if you do end up liking this video or if you find it useful in any way. So Floral Street as a brand started back in 2017, and actually they are a brand that are British and they also make vegan and cruelty-free fragrances. Their fragrances actually come in sizes of 10ml, 50ml and 100ml, and they also sell discovery kits, but annoyingly no one discovery kit has all 11 of their fragrances in, which I find really, really strange. I really do think they're missing a trick there. Also, their fragrances are marketed as unisex, so they grade their fragrances on a continuum of light to dark rather than masculine or feminine. So I'm going to start off at the lighter end of this continuum, and the first fragrance I'm going to talk about is called London Poppy. So London Poppy is meant to reflect a poppy growing in an urban environment of somewhere like London, so almost in a concrete jungle kind of environment. And I think this fragrance really lives up to its name because it does give me that impression of a hot summer's day, something that's orange almost. So this fragrance opens with a sour citrus, and there's also an aquatic feeling to this fragrance. It's a little bit salty actually to begin with. As this starts to dry, you then get a bit of ambroxan. The ambroxan is really only present in the mid of the fragrance and is only really bothersome at that point, but there is something, you know, a little bit too salty for me and a little bit grainy in the middle of the fragrance. But that thankfully kind of evens out a little bit, and you get something that then turns into sort of something a little bit more oily, which I don't know whether is meant to be that kind of sunflower accord that's listed in this fragrance. So there's something a little bit oily and a little bit sort of peppery almost and rich. And really in the dry down of this fragrance, it's all about an orange peel, jasmine and woods really. This fragrance just feels very clean and very fresh and very summery, and I liked it and I think it's quite distinctive, but I don't think this fragrance really makes me want to jump up and buy it, if you know what I mean. It's just not really me, this one. But I do think this is a nice fragrance, and I think it's one of the nicer ones of the lighter side of the fragrance box. I think this fragrance is actually quite light and it's something that doesn't last that long. I think I got about 3-4 hours out of this fragrance and then it was really gone, and it was mostly a skin scent unless I oversprayed. So that's London Poppy. So the next fragrance in the range is Wonderland Peony. I think this one is actually one of their best sellers. So this one, I see why it's a bestseller because it's really sweet, it's really girly, and it's really friendly. So it starts off with a lemony, like raspberry guava, really watery guava, really fresh feeling, but it's really sweet. It smells almost like a pick and mix sweet, this one. I can see why people like this. As this dries, it gets richer and deeper, and actually the peony comes out along with some blackcurrant. It turns quite creamy in a way, and actually the berry fruits really make me think of boiled sweets, boiled creamy sweets really. I see candy floss is listed in the notes, so maybe that's what's making me think sweet here, but I don't really smell it as candy floss. There's also vanilla listed, and I wouldn't say the vanilla is prominent either. Really, this is just a fruity floral fragrance with really no noticeable base really. So the dry down of this fragrance is really a soft musky peony with some red berry fruits. It's something that can smell a little bit like detergent on me after a while, this fragrance, but actually I think it's just a very pretty fragrance overall. And whilst it isn't something that I absolutely love, I can see why other people would like it. This is a very crowd-pleasing fragrance. I think this one is the one that gets compared to Delina, and it also gets compared to Angel Nova. I have Angel Nova. I would not compare these two fragrances. I don't think they're similar personally, but I think maybe if you don't know Angel Nova that well, maybe you might think they're similar because of that raspberry note. I'm not sure. So this is quite a soft fragrance, it's gone quite quickly, and I'd say that's really where it differs from Angel Nova. Angel Nova is very synthetic and is very fun and very in your face almost, that fragrance. This isn't in your face, but it is very sweet, very girly and very soft and creamy, and it's something that is gone within just a few hours. It doesn't really project that much after maybe the first hour even. I think if you're looking for something that's going to be strong all day, this is not the fragrance for you. So that's Wonderland Peony. So the next fragrance is one of their newer ones, and this one is Electric Rhubarb. So this fragrance, when you first spray it, really just smells like a marine, salty, almost sea-like kind of fragrance, but with some greenness. I'd say the rhubarb here is very much more of a suggestion by name rather than me smelling it. So I don't think I really smell rhubarb in this fragrance. I think if I do smell something like rhubarb, I would think more of when you're picking rhubarb and you've still got the leaves on the top of the rhubarb. It's more the greenness that I think of with this fragrance. For me, this is very much more of a marine, salty sea kind of fragrance, especially in the beginning. In the dry down, that greenness is joined by some white florals, but really they're very indistinct. There's something that I can't really pick out. But it's just got like a bit of a white floral feel, but it's definitely more of a green white floral feel than a creamy white floral feel. And really it's quite a salty fragrance throughout. It's not crazily salty, but it definitely does have a salty feeling to it. And I do get that electrical feel. It does feel a bit ozonic in a way. I think this one is quite unique. I haven't smelt anything like this really, and I don't think this is something that really appeals to me. It did last about 4 hours on my skin and didn't really project actually, it was quite close to skin. So yeah, this one's Electric Rhubarb. So the next fragrance in their range is actually called Neon Rose. So Neon Rose is a fragrance that's made without any rose in it whatsoever. So no rose oils, it's all the idea of a rose made up from other notes, which I find quite interesting. But I think if you're expecting rose, you might not get it with this fragrance, which, from the name Neon Rose, you probably would be expecting rose. So this for me is very heavy on apple blossom. That's really the most dominant and prominent note for me throughout. And if you watch my channel, you will know that apple blossom is a note that I really struggle with. I often associate apple blossom with air fresheners. So I think because of that apple blossom note, this also smells a bit aquatic to me. In the dry down, this fragrance does become a little bit greener and even a little bit more sour. The apple blossom is still there, but it is a little bit dialed back. In the dry down, I get a bit of jasmine, and it's definitely a dirtier jasmine rather than the cleaner jasmine, but it's not a strong jasmine. There's also some ambroxan again, and the ambroxan here isn't overwhelming, but I think the fact that the ambroxan is there with the apple blossom really makes me think even more of air fresheners. Maybe just because of the apple blossom and the ambroxan, this fragrance really does smell quite overpowering to me, and it does last a lot longer than the other three fragrances that I've just reviewed. It's something that lasts 5 or 6 hours on me and definitely projects much more than those other three fragrances. I simply don't like this fragrance because it features apple blossom quite so prominently, and that's something I really struggle with. But I think if you do like apple blossom and you don't have a problem with ambroxan, this fragrance could be enjoyable for you. So that's Neon Rose. So the next fragrance I think is one of their newest ones, and this one is Arizona Bloom. So Arizona Bloom is a salty, musky coconut fragrance with some light vanilla and also some musk. The coconut here is quite green smelling and quite fresh rather than creamy. And actually the opening I really like. I really like that salty, fresh, beachy coconut. Literally like you're standing by a coconut tree waiting for it to fall. It's really quite a nice beginning to this fragrance. As this dries down, it gets muskier and warmer, and actually the coconut sort of fades a little bit as it dries down and sort of turns into more of a mixture with the musk. And really the vanilla fades quite a lot as well. Really, it's just a kind of very lightly musky coconut in the dry down with perhaps a little bit of woods. I think this fragrance really makes me think of like the Juliet Has a Gun kind of range of fragrances. It's very much along the synthetic line of kind of fragrances like that. It's something that has that kind of vibe about it. I think if you like Juliet Has a Gun fragrances, you'll probably like Arizona Bloom. I do like this fragrance. I don't think this is my dream coconut fragrance. It lasted about 4 hours on my skin, and it definitely is more of a skin scent than anything else. But I think if you like those muskier coconut fragrances that are close to skin, this could be a good one for you. So that's Arizona Bloom. So the next fragrance is one of their newer ones, and it's called Sunflower Pop. And this fragrance is based around the idea of the sunflower paintings by Vincent van Gogh. And it was actually done in collaboration with the Vincent van Gogh Museum. So this fragrance, I think it just has this very bright, very uplifting, very yellow feeling kind of opening. So the listed notes are actually mandarin, passion fruit and peach bellini. And I would say the peach bellini is really the thing that it pops out. It just smells like a fruity, fruit salad kind of cocktail kind of fragrance to me in the beginning. As this dries down, it becomes more floral really, and it's just a very generic kind of floral with a lot of amber, and there's also a lot of ambroxan. And I think the amber and the ambroxan are the things that put me off this fragrance. I'm just not a big fan of something with a lot of amber. I find it a little bit cloying sometimes, and it's definitely more on the cloying side in this fragrance. So I think this fragrance is more of a skin scent for most of its life. It's something that only really projects in the first sort of hour or so, and it lasts about 4 hours on my skin. It's not really a long-lasting fragrance. So I think, I like the opening of this fragrance, but I'm just not so sure about the dry down because of the amber and the ambroxan. But I think if you do like fragrances like I Want You by Jimmy Choo, then you might enjoy this kind of fragrance. So that's Sunflower Pop. So we're about halfway now and we're moving towards the dark side. So this is the Wild Vanilla Orchid fragrance. So this one immediately reminded me the first time I tried it of Marc Jacobs Decadence. It just is that kind of green vanilla fragrance that Marc Jacobs Decadence is. So where Marc Jacobs Decadence has plum, this one has cassis. And where Marc Jacobs Decadence has vetiver and orris, this one has patchouli and I think bamboo. I do still smell vanilla in Marc Jacobs Decadence, even though it's not listed. So I think that they do have that in common, really. So this one, I think if you are looking for a dupe for Marc Jacobs Decadence, you could go further wrong, really. I don't think they're exactly the same, but they do have a definite vibe of each other. So this is a green smelling sweet vanilla fragrance, and in the beginning it's a very sweet green vanilla pod. Some very soft, very gentle citruses like mandarin. There's something watery and fresh in it as well. Later on there's sort of some dark fruitiness and some florals and some woods. And actually the dry down is that fruity woody vanilla, just like in Decadence. The projection on this fragrance is really good and it lasted about 5 hours on me. I'd say this is definitely one of the stronger ones of this range. And I think even though I like this fragrance, I think it's just too similar to Decadence for me and just not as good as Decadence. So considering I have Decadence, I have Aura, I have, a few green vanillas in my life already. I don't feel like I need this one. But I think if you're looking for a green vanilla, this is probably quite a good one to check out. So that's Wild Vanilla Orchid. So the next fragrance is actually called Iris Goddess, and this one I think is quite well regarded. So this one I think is popular because it has that makeup-y thing going on. So this is an iris, violet and carrot seed fragrance in the beginning. The carrot seed is quite dominant to begin with, but that really fades back and the iris is there throughout, and actually the violets start to grow a little bit. So the violet here is quite warm and quite fuzzy kind of violet. It's rather than a sweeter or cooler kind of violet. There's also a little bit of suede in the dry down, and that really adds a lot of texture along with all that powderiness from the iris and the violet. The beginning of this fragrance is almost a little bit medicinal with that sort of carrot seed vegetal feel, but actually in the dry down you just get a lot of texture from the suede and from the iris and the violets. It's just a very powdery, very soft kind of fragrance, but in a very sort of, grrr kind of way, really, with those kinds of notes. This one to me has a very arty feel. It makes me feel like, only cool girls would wear this one. It's something that really does have a sort of an art school feel about it. I think this kind of fragrance is something that I've come to appreciate over years of trying fragrances, and I think I just like this kind of suedey, irisy, violety, lipsticky kind of DNA. It's just something that really appeals to me. And I think if I didn't have fragrances like Violet Ida in my life, then I perhaps would consider buying this one. This fragrance actually has quite good lasting power. It lasts about 5 hours on me, and it's one of the stronger ones of this range, but still quite gentle. So that's Iris Goddess by Floral Street. So the next fragrance is actually one of my favourites from this line, and it's called Chypre Sublime, which is a rose fragrance. So this starts off with quite a leathery rose, and it's something that has a little bit of greenness to it. There's some geranium here, and it's also a little bit peppery, but it's definitely more of a jammier rose, but also quite a dry rose. If you have tried something like Love by Chopard, then you will know the kind of rose I'm talking about. It's that kind of dry rose. So this one, as it dries, you do get an almost sort of smoky feel to it. There's incense, and there's also sort of a dry, warm, fuzzy violet to this fragrance, which just adds to that dryness that you get in the beginning of the fragrance. But I really do like that leathery feel that's there throughout, really. I think this one is really quite long lasting, and it does project quite well. I think that's something that's really lacking from the lighter end of this fragrance range. And I think if I didn't have fragrances, as I've said, like Love by Chopard, I probably would be buying this one because I think it's one of my favourites from the range. So that's Chypre Sublime. So the next fragrance is probably one of the darker ones in this range. I think this one and the next one are really the two darkest of this range. And this one is Black Lotus. So this is a leather fragrance. This, I would say, is more of a black leather. It's more of like a new leather jacket kind of leather. It is quite dark and it is quite strong. And I think really the beginning of this fragrance smells quite medicinal almost. It's something that has a little touch of saffron and it just has this sort of tobacco-iness to me in the background. It has that richness that you get with a tobacco fragrance, but I don't think tobacco is listed. As this dries, the leather does fade slightly, but ultimately the rose and the saffron become more prominent, along with a woody patchouli. I think overall this is quite a simple fragrance, but I think if you're a beginner in the world of leather and you want to try a little bit of a deeper, darker one, this is probably a good one to go for. I think I've tried probably nicer leather fragrances in my sniffing career, and I think if I were going to choose a leather fragrance to buy for myself, I probably wouldn't choose this one, but I think this still is a very nice fragrance, and it lasted about 5 or 6 hours on me. It wasn't really a beast, but I think if you oversprayed, this one would, you know, be good for a night out or something. So that's Black Lotus. So the final fragrance is one that I actually have a 10ml bottle of, so I clearly like this one quite a lot. So this is Ylang Espresso. So I think the reason I like this one is because it's denoted as Floral Street as the darkest on their continuum. And I think I would agree with that, actually. I think this one and Black Lotus really are the darkest for me, but I don't think I entirely agree with the rest of their continuum. So this one is just a very strong, boozy, black espresso coffee to begin with. It smells almost like there's whiskey in this fragrance or some kind of spirit like that. Actually, the whiskey does fade back and you're left with an Ylang. So the Ylang is quite hypnotic and it's quite strong. It's quite a strong yellow floral. And actually, towards the end, you get more of rose, a bit of a dusty cocoa, and also some patchouli. I find this one just very entrancing and something that's quite seductive and just, yeah, it just sort of has that sort of gothic feel to me, this fragrance. And I really like this fragrance. I think this one would be great for a night out. I mean, I think it just is a very wintry fragrance generally, but I think that I've had people say to me that they wear this one on hot days in the desert even. So I wouldn't say that this was only a winter fragrance, but maybe just for me it perhaps is. This one I would really recommend, and I think it's definitely one of my favourites, and it lasts a long time and it projects well. So that's a Ylang Espresso. So I'd say my top 5 fragrances from the range are really a Ylang Espresso, unsurprisingly, because I bought that one. And then I have a few fragrances where I have other fragrances that kind of fill those voids. I really do also like Chypre Sublime, but that fragrance is something that really reminds me of Shop Hard Love, so I don't feel like I really need that fragrance in my life, but I do really enjoy that kind of dry rose fragrance. I also really like Iris Goddess, and I think if I didn't have Violet Ida to replace that kind of makeup-y, irisy fragrance, then I'd probably be buying that one too. My 4th choice would be Wild Vanilla Orchid. I think that one is a really nice green vanilla fragrance, and if I didn't have Decadence, I probably would be looking into that one. And I think my last choice would be Wonderland Peony. I think that fragrance is just really fresh and uplifting, and it's just really fruity and girly and sweet, and it's just fun. So Wonderland Peony is my final choice. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have enjoyed the video, then please press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And thank you so much for watching. Please let me know which of these fragrances you've tried and which ones you like and which ones you don't like. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.